This story is fairly brief, as the incident was rather brief in itself. I am currently a mature student at a college in Bedfordshire, studying fine art in a specialist art block. To make sure I get the best use of the studio, I often stay after normal hours to do extra work. Now, the art block consists of 2 floors, not including the ground floor, and the studio I work in is on the top floor. Usually there is staff or a few students wandering about, but on this occasion it happened to be an open day, and everyone was in the sports hall in the adjoining building. Seeing as I am classed as a mature student, the last member of staff handed me the keys to the studio, asking me to lock up the floor when I was finished. Everything was normal for the first hour or so. I sat in the small studio with the partition wall to the large studio ajar. Concentrating on my work, I put on the radio and began to sing along. Halfway through singing, I heard the door to the large studio open, then footsteps walking up the side of the partition. Thinking it must be a member of staff or someone that was lost, I paused my music and said, "Hello?" The footsteps sounded as if they had come up to just behind the opening to the partition, and stopped. So thinking it may have startled someone, I popped my head around to look into the larger studio, but no one was there. Shrugging it off, I put my music back on and continued with my work, but the same thing kept happening. The door would open, the footsteps would walk in my direction, then I would pop my head around and no one would be there. It was early December, at about 6 p.m., so outside was almost pitch black, and these noises were beginning to make me feel uneasy. So, I decided to lock up the studio and go do some work on the large printer and photocopier at the end of the hallway. I was a little unnerved still from my experience in the studio when the floor was on felt eerily quiet without my radio playing. So I made up my mind to photocopy just a couple more bits, then go home and finish my work on Monday. But as I was photocopying my last page, I heard the door at the other end of the corridor fly open, and someone running up the corridor towards the double doors behind me. Nearly jumping out of my skin, I spun around to see who it was, but just like in the studio, no one was there. My grandmother always used to tell me that if a spirit is trying to scare you, you need to stand your ground, then they should stop. So finding my urge to run, I looked down the corridor and said out loud, "Can you please leave me alone? You're not scaring me." Then, feeling a tad shaky, I turned back to the printer. Unfortunately, my speaking out did not work. I suddenly heard running on the stairs, banging, and the double doors behind me began to open and close a little too violently for my liking. So needless to say, I grabbed my things and ran. I've not been on that floor alone since, although my curiosity and urge to help others makes me want to return there alone, to see if whatever is there needs help. I'm Native American, Navajo specifically. If you hear stories about paranormal or strange creatures around my area, the Navajo Reservation, I can firsthand say it's true. Here's my story. This happened the summer after I finally graduated high school. I lived at my grandfather's trailer, and he had 14 heads of sheep that he trusted me to look after while he's not there. One evening, my aunt and I went to town to grab food for a cookout. When we got back, my parents told me they weren't watching the sheep, and they took off west. Around where they took off was towards my other grandpa's abandoned house. It was something out of a horror movie. But they took off farther than that, about a mile out. It was dark, and in the distance at the mountains there was a storm coming. So I had to hurry before the sheep got excited in the rain. Stupid me. I didn't take a flashlight, but I brought a sword I made out of scraps. I finally got up the steep rocky incline that surrounds my grandpa's house. I was about 200 feet away from his house, half a mile away from mine. Off in the distance, I heard one of the sheep bells. I went towards it. I almost would have fallen off the ledge that's about a 15-foot drop if I didn't see the lightning's flash of light. I was about to turn around, until I heard something say in a scratchy low voice, "Hey, come here." I was confused, because the closest house was 1 mile back, and 2 miles ahead. As I started to back up, I saw something stand up from behind a boulder. It was tall, skinny, hunched, and twitching. Then it looked at me, and the way it sounded is something I won't forget.
Come here!
I darted back towards my grandpa's abandoned house, until I heard the sheep bell again. So I went back towards it, and it was the best thing that happened to me. I found the sheep. My sheepdogs almost attacked me until I called their names out. They stopped to smell me, but started growling like they were going to kill, until I realized they were looking towards where I came running from. Now I know that there was something back there. I commanded them to attack it, and they took off as I started to herd the sheep back. Once I got back, I told everyone. No one believed me until a few days later. I started getting dreams of me killing my family. They were so horrible that I was convinced that I really did it, because of how gruesome they would be. I would also be very rude and mean to everyone and everything. My little brother told me that I was standing at the doorway in the middle of the night, wielding my handmade knife. But I don't remember doing anything like that. One night it got worse, that I was up at witching hour. I went outside because it was hot. There was that thing standing on the top of the hill in the east. In the blink of an eye, though, it was gone. I went back inside, laid down, and had a balloon to pop. In case it did something, I was tempted to wake everyone up with a loud bang. Nothing happened, and I almost fell asleep before my final dream hit me. I smothered my little brother and stabbed him multiple times. I jerked awake, went over to him, and checked on him to see if he was okay. I started crying thinking that was my last dream about me killing my family. So I went outside, started a fire, burned all my handmade weapons, so I wouldn't hurt anyone, and prayed in Navajo for a whole 30 minutes. Then I felt like I wasn't being watched anymore. I called my close cousin Casey, who was surprisingly awake, but he has experienced similar things and just told him what happened from the evening my sheep were gone. Later on I told my family, and a lot of prayers and ceremonies were done. I'm okay now, but the medicine man told my grandpa that I was possessed, and that it's good I got the ceremonies done before something bad would have happened. I still haven't gone back to that area. Is it scary to say that I want to? We had lived in our house for the best part of 20 years. It was around 150 years old. As far back as I could remember, there were always strange goings-on in the house. Footsteps in the hallways, and loud unexplained bangs at night. When we first moved into the house, we were all quite scared by this, but as the years went on, we got used to it and just ignored it. Visitors would regularly comment on the strange footsteps and loud bangs, and we would joke that it was our resident ghost. As far as I remember, the only time someone saw the ghost was when my great-grandmother came to visit for a few days. My mother was speaking to our neighbor in the kitchen, and when the neighbor left, my grandmother asked who the man was standing behind our neighbor. My mother said it was just her and our neighbor in the kitchen at the time, at which point I vividly remember her face turning pale, and she didn't speak for the rest of that day. The following day she decided to cut her stay short and left. We also got through about 5 babysitters who refused to come back to the house after spending an evening looking after us kids. My sister also experienced something a bit more alarming. She was on her own in her bedroom one evening, and while watching TV, an ornament on the TV flew off and hit her. None of us really believed her, but to this day she is adamant it really happened. This room we affectionately called the ghost room from then on. I had been living abroad for 4 years, and I had come back home to live with my parents while looking around for a place of my own. By this time my brother and sister had left home, and on my return my mother kindly made a room up for me. Unfortunately, this turned out to be the ghost room. The first few nights passed by uneventfully. After about a week I was in bed watching a TV program called Most Haunted, with the presenter Yvette Fielding. For those who've never seen this before, the Most Haunted team spend the night in haunted houses across the UK, and try to capture paranormal events. During the program, the team regularly asks out loud things like, "Is there anyone here?" or "If you can hear us, please give us a sign," or "If there are any spirits present, please make a noise." As the program finished, I turned the lights out and switched the TV off. Just as I had done so, and in the knowledge that no one else was in the house, I prepared to go to sleep. Then after about 5 minutes, and still completely awake, something tapped me on my shoulder. I can clearly remember the feeling, a definite and strong 3 taps on my shoulder. As you can imagine, I completely shit myself. I switched the lights back on and searched the entire house to see if anyone was around, but the house was empty. I can honestly say I've never been so scared in all my life, and sat awake for the rest of the night with the lights on. During this time I thought it could have been possible that the ghost or spirit, whatever you want to call it, I heard the TV earlier when I was watching Most Haunted, and assumed it was me asking if anyone was there or give us a sign if anyone is there. It might not have known about TVs and thought it was someone present in the room asking these questions. Anyway, so now it knew that I knew it was there. For the rest of my stay at the house, about 4 months, every night I was awoken with the 3 taps on my shoulder, and always between the hours of 3 and 4 o'clock in the morning. I ended up getting used to it, and also got used to little sleep, as when it woke me up, I could never get back to sleep. When it happened, there was always a dark, almost tangible presence in the room. I eventually plucked up the courage and asked out loud if there was anything I could do to help, and if it would be possible to stop waking me up at 3 o'clock every morning. This only made matters worse. Instead of the usual 3 taps on the shoulder, it started to wake me up by pulling my duvet off and whispering stuff in my ear, which I couldn't understand. I ended up moving into another bedroom in a newly built part of the house, thinking it couldn't go into a new room, but annoyingly, it just followed me. You might ask why I stayed in the house for 4 months while this was going on. The simple answer is, I didn't have anywhere else to stay. During the last week of my stay, I slept in a tent in the garden. Thankfully, it didn't follow me there. My parents thought I was mad at the time, but I never told them what happened, as I didn't want to scare them. The last bit of the story worth mentioning. One Christmas years later, with the family back at the house, and after the customary few drinks on Christmas Day, I finally decided to tell everyone. As I was finishing my story, my brother's girlfriend was visibly petrified. The TV suddenly flickered and all the power went off in the house. After this, I think that most of my family and others present believed me. As for my brother's girlfriend and other guests present, they never stepped foot in the house again. The moral of the story? Don't watch Most Haunted in a haunted house. It started in January of 2006. The first sign was a jar of peanut butter, found on the rim of the kitchen sink, on its side with a big glop of peanut butter on the counter, and a dripping pool of melted peanut butter on the floor. I thought it was the kids being messy. That was the beginning of a year of dumping, spraying, spilling, slashing, cutting, bashing doors, leaving slippery traps, and playing with the electricity. The first 2 months of 2007 were the worst. It moved furniture. It threw everything it could at my daughter's door, including knives, cans, pots and pans, and dishes. It wrote on the walls. It hid things in the vents. We couldn't keep toilet paper, paper towels, soap, shampoo, or any kind of personal need in the house. Every time we bought toilet paper, it would dump it in the toilet. It took cell phones. The first was put in the toilet. The second, mine, was dumped in my coffee cup when I fell asleep. It put the third in the peanut butter jar. It banged on the walls, killed kittens, made us sick with fear and frustration. It punched holes in the bedroom doors using an 8-pound mallet, bent the doorknobs. It put fingernail polish inside the lock mechanism of the doorknobs. We would go out a door. It would lock it behind us. It destroyed my dishwasher, plugged up the sink, and flooded the house. Every day was some attack in one way or another. We would set the air conditioner at 81 degrees. It would set it at 79. I would turn off the AC at night before bed. In the morning, it would be turned on and set at 79 degrees. There were so many things that it did. Vile, vicious attempts to interfere with every aspect of our lives. It took every can or jar of flour, salt, coffee, tea, spices, sugar, and piled it on the floor, over and over again. It took packaged cake icing, and flung it around the living room, on the walls, ceilings, floors. Next would be the goodies it found in the cat boxes. Anything it could find in the pantry was dumped, spread, or flung about the house. It poured oil on my computer. It would set traps, such as balancing an egg on the bathroom door that would fall when moved, or piling cinnamon and sugar on the ceiling fan, and when we walked into the room, would start the fan. It would put a lighter in the coffee pot twice. which would explode. The second time, it blew the coffee pot apart. We never knew what we would find when we opened a door, picked up trash, or walked down the hall. In the beginning, some of the outrageous things it did made us laugh. We stopped laughing very soon. It started to attack our electronics. My brand new flat panel computer monitor was slashed several times. My daughter's brand new Dell had shaving cream sprayed inside it, and other things we have yet to identify. Several times, in a matter of 10 minutes of leaving the keyboard of the computer, we would return to find piles of cat feces placed in perfect round piles on the keyboards. We would find my daughter's bikini underwear up in the branches of the big pepper tree in our front yard. We have over 500 digital photos and videos of the vicious attacks on my daughter's bedroom door. We reached out, we contacted people. We had an investigative team come up from the San Diego area 5 times with all of the latest equipment. Their conclusions were vague, but informative. There was no solution to our manifestations, only advices. We had a cleansing, it didn't work. Our family dynamics didn't permit the unity needed to make this thing go away. In March of 2007, when my daughter was asleep, it spread toilet paper and paper towels all throughout the house, and set 2 fires underneath them. That was the final straw. We could no longer put off our fear. We moved out. It tried to kill us. We had to move. We feared for our lives. We are trying to heal. We'll never forget. This incident is one that occurred about a month ago. Everything I write here will be portrayed in the exact way it was portrayed to me. First off, I'm really sensitive to energy and whatnot. Everywhere I go and every person I'm with, my senses are on high alert. It has caused serious anxiety since I was very young. I can walk into a building and immediately feel a certain vibe, whether it be light, heavy, sad, happy, alone or not alone. I invited my close friend, Lana, over to my house after feeling the need to see her. When she first got there, I noticed she seemed a bit off, but I ignored it and continued with the usual let's catch up conversation. After a little while, I brought up a small experience I had recently. I often experience an overwhelming presence, and sometimes I'll share with her if I need to talk about it. I noticed when the topic of ghosts came up, she seemed to perk up a bit, not in a good way. And after I finished talking, she said, "Actually, it's kind of weird you're mentioning that type of stuff. Something really bad happened a couple weeks ago, and I haven't told you about it yet." Side note, a few days before I made plans to see her, I had a really unsettling nightmare. I saw an image of a childlike female in a dress stand before me in a hallway. She was unable to speak, and only stood there staring at me. That was all I remember from the dream, and I forgot all about it after. This could or could not have some meaning behind it, but I thought it's worth mentioning. Lana has a cousin, Abigail, whom we both spend time with most of the time when I see them. I just go over to Abby's house. I've mentioned to Lana before, a long time ago, how I feel about her house. It's a heavy, dark, unsettling atmosphere that doesn't fail to put me on edge every time. She has agreed with me before that she feels a bit uneasy there. That's all we ever said about it before this incident, and we never mentioned how we felt to Abby. You ignore feeling it after a while. Abigail's grandparents have both passed away, and she misses them greatly. She decided that she wanted to make a Ouija board and see if it was possible to get in contact with them. If I'd been there to put a stop to it, believe me, I would have. After a while of tinkering with and perfecting their homemade Ouija board, they started off. It took some time before they were able to get a response, but they did. They got in contact with their grandpa, and Abby was as ecstatic as you can imagine, overjoyed, fulfilled, until it completely cut off, and something else took over. Without their control and without warning, they started asking questions. It said it was a bad spirit. 9 years old, female, died in a car accident. At this point in Lana's story, I'm already jaw-dropped, and I immediately remember back to my image-like dream. I felt sick. After a few more questions, they wanted to say goodbye, considering this wasn't who they wanted to talk to. However, the spirit said no. They said goodbye again. No. A third time. No. It went to no every time. Now feeling quite panicky, they calmed themselves and kept talking, asking some distracting questions like favorite color, where they were born, etc. They felt ready to say goodbye again, but the planchette flew across the board to no, so fast, in a really aggressive manner. They were so terrified, they ripped up their homemade board and threw it on the bed. They left for a couple of hours, got some food, and took their minds off it. When they returned, there was the Ouija board sitting on the bed, placed back together like a puzzle, mocking them. Of course, I completely disregarded this and said she had to be lying. But the whole time, my friend was sitting there, shaking, almost in tears as she's telling me. I could feel the fear radiating from her. I've been friends with her for over 10 years. She's not a jokester. I've never seen her so scared. She said she didn't tell me right away because she didn't even talk to her cousin about it right after it happened, trying to act like it never really did happen, as something so mind-boggling and mentally traumatizing could actually occur. She said that since then, Abby is seeing, hearing, and feeling things. I think her absolute fear is only giving off more energy to make this entity more powerful. I don't think this 9-year-old girl is the ultimate spirit truly at play. I think there is something darker controlling everything, hence why the girl in my dream didn't say or do anything. Also makes sense that if it was something more intense, it would use this other spirit to seem more friendly, or less intimidating. Please, if you ever feel the urge or desire to try using a Ouija board, just don't. Not worth it. I'm Odessa. I'm 22 from New Hampshire. This experience happened about a month ago, which I label the most scariest and bizarre encounter of my life. And I don't exactly feel comfortable with sharing this experience with others, since there are those out there who are closed-minded to these types of things. I was always open to the belief of spirits, but the ideas of demons and possession always seemed a bit far-fetched to me. That seemed like the kind of thing you only see in the movies. Well, after this one long night, I look at things from a whole new perspective. Under a year ago, I became friends with Robin and Dan. They're a nice couple, a bit shy and awkward at times, but whenever I need someone to talk to or a place to go, they're there for me. They recently took in a new roommate whom they have known for years, Cody. Cody wasn't getting along with his family, so they took him in. When I had slept over, I slept in the same room as him. He sleeps on the floor on a giant mattress, and I sleep on the futon, which is almost next to it, but there's a table between us. Robin and Dan sleep in their own room, which is out by the kitchen. The first 2 nights I slept over, I woke up during the night to hear Cody sleep whispering. It was the eeriest thing. Most of it sounded gibberish, or almost like a whole other language. I didn't think much of it, other than it was just strange sounding sleep talk. Although, I had never exactly experienced anyone sound like that before. The second time I experienced it, the next morning I did mention it to him that he makes a lot of sounds in his sleep, and he just said, "Oh, really?" and brushed it off. The third night I spent there was the last night spent with him. This time a friend of mine was over, Kat. Robin and Dan decided to go to bed early. Kat, Cody, and I stayed up for a little bit and then all decided to crash on that giant mattress that he usually sleeps on. I slept on my side facing away from them. Kat was sleeping in the middle. Throughout the night I kept hearing the strangest noises. It was occasionally throat-clearing sounds, slight grunts, and slight movement. It took me a second to realize. It was Cody's sleep talk that was going on again. Before I'd realized that, I thought that maybe both Kat and Cody were awake, messing around next to me, which would have been really awkward. Slightly unsure, I braced myself and rolled over to see Kat sleeping. I poked her and she woke up, and we started discussing the noises coming from Cody next to us. I started giggling in relief when I mentioned that I had thought they were potentially messing around. I realized the more I talked and giggled, the louder the noises were getting from Cody. The sleep whispering started up again. Now, finding the whole aspect of sleep talkers amusing, we came up with the idea of trying to talk to him to see if he would talk back to us in a sleepy state. Biggest mistake ever. This is where it all goes downhill. So, Kat and I were trying to come up with things to say or ask, At first, she started asking him random questions. Silly things like, "Hey, Cody, did you run out of hot dogs?" Each time, he twitched a little bit and whispered a little more gibberish sounds. He was reacting to her voice. It started to sound creepy, but still full of innocent laughs of finding it amusing. I said, "Wow, he sounds like a demon. Cat, you should ask him if he's a demon." The second I ended that sentence, the room went cold instantly. I can't even begin to explain the dark, heavy, cold feeling that filled the room. Cody sat straight up out of bed. His eyes rolled back up into his head and he started gagging and then snarling. Kat and I, in such a stunned state, ran straight into the bathroom and locked the door. The fear inside me didn't even sink in yet. I wasn't exactly scared yet, just shocked and confused. I kept asking, What just happened?" Cody's sleep whispering started to turn into actual sleep talking. The bathroom is across the room, so I couldn't hear everything that was being said or all the noises coming from him. But the voice I did hear didn't even sound like his, but it was clearly coming from him. It was very deep. It was like there were two different voices talking back and forth in gibberish, or another language, with occasionally English. I kept hearing him say, "They are still in there." Kat was really upset and started to shake and cry. I was still in my own personal state of shock and denial. It crossed my mind, could this be a joke? But there was such a cold, heavy, dark feeling. Unfortunately, I knew it wasn't, but I wanted it to be. Finally, it went quiet. We probably waited in silence for probably a total of 15 minutes. While I worked up the courage to open the door and check on him, Kat whispered that maybe he went back to sleep since it had been quiet for a while. I had an awful feeling in my stomach, but I put my hand on the doorknob and whipped the door open extremely fast. There he was, just sitting straight up on the mattress like he was waiting for me, looking me dead straight in the eyes, in the most evil demonic grin. Even though it was dark, it was almost like he had a ghastly glow. He was the only thing that stood out in the room, looking right at me. Instant panic. I slammed the door and locked it again. Now, the fear finally sunk inside of me. I started to get teary-eyed a little bit. I started to pray inside of my head. I was praying for all this to pass over and to be kept safe. He began talking again, started off with those gibberish noises, while kind of making a clicking sort of sound. Then the deeper voice came out and said,
Open the door.
Then we hear Cody's normal voice again, and it sounded like he's crying and whimpering. He starts to plead for Kat to open the door. Over and over again, he kept saying, "Kat, please, open the door. Kat, please." Kat looked at me, and she asked if she should say something back. I told her no. I said we need to just keep waiting this out. We were in there for such a long time. Must have been about 45 minutes that had passed. Throughout the whole time, I could hear Cody talking that gibberish talk across from the room as usual, but then the bathroom door started to vibrate. This is when I had enough. I knew there were 2 windows open in the apartment, and Dan and Robin were just a couple rooms away. I decided to scream and bang my fists on the door in hopes to get someone's attention. When I did that, instantly the dark, cold feeling went away, and then I heard Cody say, "What the fuck?" Apparently when I did that, it somehow snapped him out of his possession. I knew it was safe, but I was still hesitant to come out. We talked back and forth to him a little bit through the door. Then I finally opened the door, and went and sat down to talk to him. He said his throat felt dry and that he didn't remember anything that happened. He said he could remember feeling his body move around though. I described detail by detail everything that happened, to which he then opened up about how he has a spirit named John attached to him. He said John has been with him for about 7 years now. He described a couple times where his ex-girlfriend, who he dated for about a year, would be afraid to sleep next to him because she'd hear him having conversations with this John in his sleep. He also explained how his mother is aware of the situation, and that his grandfather used to have a spirit attached to him as well. But he assured us that John would never want to harm anyone. I spoke up in disagreement. I told him what I felt was evil, and that I felt like it wanted to either harm or scare us badly. He seemed to start to get annoyed with me, like it offended him that I was hinting that John is actually a demon. But talking it out made everything seem a lot better. I was able to throw out a couple laughs too. I was also just relieved that everything was over. Or so I thought. I started to apologize though. Well, it wasn't a direct apology, but I explained that neither of us meant to offend him or John in any sort of way, and that if we had known about this before, then we probably wouldn't have tried to joke around when he was sleeping. The second after I ended my little apology, the room went cold again. Keep in mind, it was a really warm night. I looked down at my legs in shock of the coldness with that awful feeling again, and the second I look back up, I see Cody's eyes roll back again as he falls back onto the bed. Kat and I ran for the door to leave the apartment. I didn't look back, but Kat said she looked back as he watched us leave, with that huge demonic grin on his face. Kat and I were wandering the streets of town, not knowing what to do. It must have been a little after 5 a.m. at the time, and we eventually made our way over to Dunkin' Donuts to get some coffee. We sat at the table and talked about what we should do. I suggested that since there was a church right up the hill, that we should try to talk to a priest. I just wanted some assurance, or advice, or even a prayer or anything that would help the situation become better. She looked up a number on her phone and tried to call it. Due to bad service, we couldn't understand what was being said on the other end of the phone. So, we decided to walk up to the church. We sat on a bench for a little bit, and the priest, who lives right next to the church, came out and invited us inside of his home. We sat on his couch and explained everything we experienced. I felt so relieved though as I explained everything to him, because my biggest fear was to explain something and get looked at like I'm some kind of nutcase. He listened in belief, and explained how a family friend of his had a similar problem, but didn't get into too much detail. I told him my fear is that whatever is inside him might try to latch onto us or haunt us, and he assured us that it's Cody's own demon, and that it's his problem, not ours. He also explained that the situation becomes worse when the person doesn't recognize it as a problem. He said Cody probably views the demon as if it's his friend. I completely agreed with that statement because Cody seemed to get offended when I referred to it as a demon instead of a spirit. The priest also told us that it feeds on fear, and that we just need to keep our faith and strength, and we'll be okay. We left his house feeling a little bit better. Kat was a bit more hesitant, but I tried to work up her confidence to head back to the apartment. I told her we were going to carry on a normal conversation right as we walked through that door as if everything is fine, which is exactly what we did. I opened the door to the apartment and Cody was up and awake playing video games. We awkwardly sat down and we were all just quiet. We didn't really know what to say, and neither did he. I got on my laptop, and Kat got on hers, and we were sending messages back and forth quietly. In her message, she told me not to tell Robin and Dan about the situation when they wake up, because if they hear about it, they'll probably kick Cody out, and he will be homeless. I debated, but agreed not to anyway. She decided to get up and go outside for a smoke. Cody stopped playing his video game, and went into his bag and got some clothes, and went into the bathroom to take a shower. I was still using my laptop messaging people on Facebook. I could hear Cody making noises while in the shower. It was just slight coughing and that clearing of the throat noise again, and I started to get a weird feeling. It wasn't as bad and cold as before, but I had a gut feeling that I should just go step outside with Kat. So, I did. We were outside for about 15 more minutes and then headed back inside, and Cody was out and back to playing video games. Kat goes into the bathroom to use it, and she comes out, sits down, and messages me from her laptop again. She told me in the message that Cody's pocket knife is just randomly sitting in the sink. That instantly put a sickly, awful feeling in my stomach. She turns to Cody and asks if she can step outside and talk to him. He agrees, and they head outside. While they were still outside, Robin wakes up and comes out of her room. After the whole pocket knife thing, which I later learned he had no memory of, I completely changed my mind about being quiet about everything. I immediately told Robin about the whole thing, to which she then went and talked to Dan, and then they stepped outside with Kat and Cody. Both Robin and Dan were disturbed by it all, and agreed that they don't want Cody living with them anymore. They suggested for him to sleep at Cassie's house for now, until everything gets sorted out. Cassie lives right up the road at an apartment of her own, and she is also an acquaintance of ours. Kat and I decided to spend another night at Robin and Dan's. Around 11:30 p.m. at night, Cassie started sending frantic texts about Cody's behavior. Apparently, Cody was sitting on her couch talking to her, and he fell back like he went to sleep. But when he sat back up, his eyes rolled back. But then he snapped out of it and carried on a normal conversation with her. She was really freaked out about it, and we had her come over to talk to us about everything. Out of fear of going back to her own apartment, she decided to sleep over with us. We were all up a good part of the night, talking about what to do. We decided that it's best to try to contact Cody's family, or mother, since she's the one that's supposedly most aware of it all. The next morning, I went home and later heard they did take care of the situation, and contacted Cody's mother. So, he is now living back home. Now, flash forward after all of this, I'd cut off all ties and contact with Cody. Even though I did value the friendship and memories made with him in the past, I just decided it was best not to talk to him anymore because of everything bad that had happened. I still kept a friendship with everyone else, of course. But sadly, Kat found it hard to do so, and continued to keep up a friendship with him until he broke into her own apartment one night. Unsure what caused him to do so, or if he was possessed, she called the police and is currently working on getting a restraining order on him. And this is where my story ends. I have to say, though, this was the most traumatizing experience I had ever been through. I'm thankful that I'm not haunted by nightmares or anything like that. All this is such an eye-opener to what kind of things are really out there. The few people I've shared this with have been closed-minded with an occasional person who understands and believes, but I've been told by others maybe he was on drugs, or maybe he has some sort of schizophrenia or personality disorder. In some ways, I could see why some people would think that. But I know what I saw, and I know what I felt. From the noise and voice changes, to the dark feelings, and to temperature change, it was something much more paranormal and out of this world. I'm curious to hear if anyone else has had a similar experience, or has heard of a similar experience. Even opinions would be interesting to hear. Another thing I found odd was how no one heard my screams or banging when Kat and I locked ourselves in the bathroom. Like I'd mentioned, 2 windows are open. They live in an apartment building, surrounded by other apartments. Dan and Robin were just a couple of rooms away, and supposedly they are light sleepers. How did no one hear us? I got chills when Dan later explained to me how in the horror movies he's seen, that demons can supposedly block out sound so no one else can hear you. I have no clue how true that is, but I definitely wouldn't doubt it. But I wonder, does Cody really not think John is a demon? I don't think regular spirits can possess people, only demons can. I wonder if this is all a ticking time bomb, and it's only a matter of time until I see his name listed in a police report for harming someone. So many thoughts, so many questions. Hey guys, I think I found some pretty great stories this time. You know, I was trying my hardest to get a good intro starting with this video, but all the good ones that I could do something with take money. It's unfortunate, but I'll have to wait until I can pay for one. Anyway, on to more important matters. I want to see if I can speed up my uploading just a bit. I can't promise anything, but I will try to upload a bit more often. Nearly a week is a bit too long for my taste. Oh, and I noticed I have quite a few more subscribers now since I did my last video. Thank you very much for subscribing. I used to think it's silly when new YouTubers get happy or excited for 100 subscribers. And yet I have less than that at the time of this recording. And I'm even a little happy. Yep, I feel silly, but also thankful. Anyway, I'll see you in the next video. If it's fear you're after, welcome home.